I spent 15 years building a tech empire while my family celebrated every crumb of my singer sister's success. Today they found out and they're in shock. My name is Marina, I'm 31 years old now, and if you had asked me 10 years ago what kind of family I had, I probably would have said normal. But looking back, the signs were always there, screaming in my face while I pretended not to see. I was 16 when I discovered my family had already decided who was important. It wasn't a dramatic announcement, nor a serious conversation at the dinner table. It was something gradual, silent, like poison slowly dripping into a glass of crystal clear water. My younger sister, Isabella, was 13 at the time. She was one of those kids who naturally shined. Long, wavy hair, perfect smile, that kind of beauty that made people stop to look. And she knew it. God, how she knew it. Isabella sang. Not just singing in the shower or in the car like normal people. She had private lessons 3 times a week, participated in state competitions, and my parents acted as if she were the next big star of Brazilian music. Every performance was an event. My mother, Lucia, bought expensive dresses. My father, Roberto, filmed everything at professional angles, and the whole family attended as if it were a show at the municipal theater. Meanwhile, I was in the school library building my first website. I learned HTML on my own, using free tutorials on the internet and an old computer my uncle was going to throw away. I found it fascinating, the idea of creating something from nothing, of writing lines of code and seeing it come to life on the screen. I showed my parents once. My father looked over his shoulder while reading the newspaper and said, "That's cool, honey. But don't spend too much time in front of that screen. It's bad for your eyes." My mother didn't even look up from the decorating magazine she was flipping through. 2 weeks later, Isabella won 3rd place in a local talent festival. They threw a party. Literally. They invited uncles, cousins, neighbors. They bought a 3-tier cake with her name in gold icing. My father made a speech about how special she was, how she had a rare gift, how she was destined for greatness. I was sitting in the corner of the room, eating a piece of cake alone, when my Aunt Rita approached. "And you, Marina? How are your studies going?" "Good," I replied. "I'm learning programming. I just created a website to help students organize their study schedules." She smiled, but it was that kind of polite smile people give when they're not really interested. "Oh, that's nice, dear. Always important to have a little hobby." Little hobby. That word kept echoing in my head for days. As the years passed, the pattern solidified like concrete. Isabella had singing, guitar, piano, theater lessons. My parents paid for her to record a professional EP when she was only 15. She had an Instagram account full of perfectly edited photos, singing in city cafes, and my parents shared every post as if she were an international celebrity. I, on the other hand, was working. At 18, I had already created websites for 5 local small businesses. Nothing sophisticated, but functional and beautiful. I charged cheap because I was building a portfolio. The money I earned, I saved. I had plans. I wanted to study computer science at a federal university, maybe even do an exchange program. When I mentioned this during a Sunday dinner, my mother stopped chewing. "Federal university? Marina, you know how difficult it is to get into those institutions. Wouldn't it be more sensible to do a technical course? Something more guaranteed." "I have good grades, Mom. And I'm studying hard for the ENEM." My father intervened, wiping his mouth with his napkin. "Your mother is right. We don't want you to be disappointed. Those federal universities are for exceptional students." Exceptional? Like Isabella, presumably. I didn't argue. I just nodded and continued eating my rice, feeling something heavy settling in my chest. But that night, locked in my room, I studied until 3 in the morning. I solved math problems until my head hurt. I reviewed essays until the words started to blur on the page. If they thought I wasn't exceptional, I would prove otherwise. Not for them, but for myself. I passed the entrance exam. Not only did I pass, I was approved in 2nd place in the computer science program. When I received the result, I ran to the living room where my parents were watching television. "Mom. Dad. I passed. 2nd place." My mother smiled, a genuine smile this time. "How wonderful, honey. We're proud." My father stood up and gave me a quick hug. Congratulations, Marina. I knew you could do it. And that was it. No party, no cake, no speech. Isabella, who was sitting on the couch looking at her phone, didn't even look up. 3 months later, Isabella was selected to participate in a talent reality show on television. She didn't even make it to the finals, was eliminated in the third round. But my parents treated it as if she had won the World Cup. Surprise party. Banner written, "Congratulations for your courage." My father rented a hall. There was a professional photographer, DJ, complete buffet. He made an emotional speech about how Isabella had faced her fears, how she had represented the family on national television, how she was just beginning her journey to stardom. I was there, wearing a dress borrowed from my friend because I hadn't been warned with enough advance notice to buy something appropriate. I watched everything with a forced smile on my face, drinking warm soda and wondering what I would need to do to deserve a tenth of that attention. University was my salvation and my prison at the same time. I loved learning, loved the challenges, loved being surrounded by people who valued knowledge and skill. But financially, it was brutal. My parents paid for Isabella's private music college without hesitation. For me, they said that a federal university was free, so I was all set. What they didn't consider were the books, transportation, food, materials. I started doing freelance work on the internet, creating websites, doing system maintenance, offering basic consulting for small business owners. I slept 4 hours a night. My weekends were spent in front of the computer, not at parties or outings. Isabella, meanwhile, traveled to workshops in Sao Paulo, participated in music festivals in other states, always with everything paid for by our parents. She posted photos in nice hotels, sophisticated restaurants, wearing designer clothes. And there I was, eating instant noodles in my tiny studio apartment, coding until my fingers hurt. But something interesting happened during those years. I got good. Very good. In my third year of college, I created an app to help small merchants manage inventory and sales in an integrated way. It was simple, intuitive, cheap. I started offering it to shopkeepers in the region. In 6 months, I had 50 paying clients. In a year, there were 200. The money started coming in for real. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine. Every cent earned with my own effort, my own intelligence, my own hands. I graduated with honors. I was class speaker. My parents attended the ceremony, arrived late because Isabella had an important meeting with a music producer that, apparently, never materialized into anything. I took photos alone after graduation. My college friends threw more of a party for me than my own family. That night, driving back home, I realized something. I had spent the last years of my life trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided I had none. And suddenly, that seemed so absurdly exhausting that I started laughing alone in the car, laughing until tears ran down my face. Because the truth was simple and painful, they were never going to see me. No matter how much I achieved, how much I grew, how much I proved. Isabella was the sun around which they orbited, and I was just a star too distant to be noticed. So I stopped trying. Not dramatically. I didn't cut off relations or make big declarations. I just stopped. Stopped expecting praise. Stopped sharing my achievements. Stopped showing up at Sunday dinners when I could make up a reasonable excuse. And I started building. Not for them, but for myself. My company, which I started as a side project, grew faster than I expected. I hired my first employee, then 2 more. We moved to a small but real office. Nothing fancy, just some desks, good computers, and lots of coffee. The app evolved. I added features based on customer feedback. We implemented artificial intelligence for sales forecasting. We expanded to other states. We started competing with established companies. And my parents knew nothing about any of this. To them, I was still the Marina who messed with computers, who had a little internet job, who was getting by. Isabella, meanwhile, had released a single that played 3 times on a local radio station, and that became news at the dinner table for 3 consecutive months. I was 26 when the event that changed everything happened. My father called me on a Tuesday afternoon. Strange, because he never called. It was always my mother who made contact, short messages asking if I was okay, if I was eating properly, the kind of generic concern that didn't require much emotional effort. Marina, his voice sounded heavy. I need to talk to you. In person. It's about the company. My father had a construction materials distribution company. Nothing glamorous but solid. He had built it from scratch, working 16 hours a day when I was a child. It was his pride, his legacy, as he always said. What company, Dad? Mine. Ours. Look, I can't talk on the phone. Can you come here tonight? Something in his tone alerted me. It wasn't just serious, it was defeated. I arrived at my parents' house at 7 p.m. The living room was dark, only one lamp lit. My mother was on the couch, her eyes red. She had clearly been crying. My father was sitting in the armchair, holding a glass of whiskey with both hands. Isabella wasn't there. Apparently she had a performance at some bar in the city. What happened? I asked, sitting in front of them. My father took a deep breath. The company is going bankrupt. The words fell like stones in the silence of the room. What do you mean bankrupt? He started explaining, and the more he talked, the more my stomach sank. Apparently, 3 years ago, he had decided to expand the business. He invested in new warehouses, increased inventory, hired more employees. And to manage this expansion, he had put someone in operational command. Isabella. My sister, who had never worked a single day in her life, who couldn't tell the difference between an invoice and a receipt, who thought Excel was a chewing gum brand. She was managing the company. Why Isabella? I managed to ask, my voice calmer than I felt. She needed an opportunity. My mother replied, her voice trembling. The music career wasn't going as we expected, and your father thought it would be good for her to learn about business. Have something solid to fall back on. Learn about business. Using the family company as an experiment laboratory. And how exactly did this lead to bankruptcy? My father took a long sip of whiskey. She made some impulsive decisions. Changed suppliers without researching properly, betting on lower prices that turned out to be fraud. Fired experienced employees because she thought they were negative. Invested in an expensive marketing campaign that brought no return. And he stopped, as if the next words were too painful to come out. And what? I pressed. She didn't pay taxes for 8 months. She thought she could negotiate later. Now we have a huge debt with the federal revenue, suppliers suing us, and no working capital to operate. I remained silent, processing. My sister, the golden girl, the bright star of the family, had destroyed in 3 years what my father took 25 to build. Where is Isabella now? I asked. Singing, my mother said, almost in a whisper. She said she needed to keep her mind busy, that she couldn't keep thinking about negative things. Of course. While the company was sinking, she was on an improvised stage singing to 20 people in a bar. And why are you telling me this? I already knew the answer, but I wanted to hear them say it. My father finally looked me in the eyes. Because you understand technology systems. I thought maybe you could take a look at our processes, see if you can optimize something, help us save money. I know you're busy with your computer work, but it would just be for a few weeks. Computer work. After everything, that was still what they thought I did. How much time do we have? I asked. 2, maybe 3 months before we have to officially declare bankruptcy. I looked at them, my parents, looking 10 years older than the last time I had seen them. Part of me wanted to help immediately. They were my family after all. But another part, a part that had been ignored and underestimated for years, wanted to say no and leave that room. I'll think about it, was all I could say. I drove back to my apartment in absolute silence. No music, no radio, just the sound of the engine and my chaotic thoughts. They wanted my help. After years treating me like a plan B, like the less important daughter, less talented, less worthy of attention. Now, with everything falling apart, they remembered I existed. And the cruelest part? They still thought my computer work was a hobby I could pause for a few weeks to save the company they gave as a gift to my incompetent sister. I got home, opened my laptop and looked at my company's dashboard. Monthly revenue, 340,000 Brazilian reals. Growth, 23% compared to the previous month. New clients, 47. Satisfaction rate, 4.8 out of 5 stars. It wasn't computer work. It was a real business, built with blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. It was mine. And for the first time in my life, I had to decide. Would I save the people who never believed in me, or continue building the empire they didn't even know existed? I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on my apartment balcony, looking at the city, pondering. The next few days were strange. I continued working normally, meetings with clients, code reviews with my team, planning new features. But there was a part of my mind constantly returning to that dark room, to my parents' tired faces, to the company that was sinking. My mother started sending messages. Not directly about the situation, but those texts loaded with implications that she always used when she wanted something. "Hi honey, how are you? It's been a while since we talked properly. Marina, your father isn't sleeping well. He's very worried. I remembered you today when you were little and always said you were going to help Daddy at the company." I read each message and felt a mixture of guilt and anger. Guilt because they were my parents, because I still loved them despite everything. Anger because this sudden attention only appeared when they needed something. On the 5th day, I finally replied, "Mom, I'll take a look at the company's situation. But I can't promise anything." The response came in seconds. Honey, your father will be so relieved. You were always so smart, so responsible. Can you come tomorrow? Always so smart." Funny how that quality was only mentioned when it was useful to them. I arrived at the company on Saturday morning. It was a large warehouse in the industrial zone, with attached offices. I remembered coming here as a child, running between the piles of material while my father worked. He used to lift me up and put me on his shoulders, show me everything with pride. "One day this will be yours and Isabella's," he would say. Now, looking at the place from outside, I noticed how degraded it was. Peeling paint, rusty gate, weeds growing in the parking lot cracks. My father was waiting for me at the office door. He seemed to have aged even more in just 1 week. "Marina, thank you for coming." Really? We spent the next 4 hours going through documents, spreadsheets, and systems. And with each folder I opened, each report I read, the situation became clearer and more catastrophic. Isabella hadn't just made mistakes. She had been negligent in a way that bordered on criminal. Contracts signed without reading, money spent on consultancies that were clearly scams, decisions made based on intuition instead of data. There was a particularly revealing email I found from Isabella to a supplier. "Look, I don't understand much about these boring bureaucratic things. My thing is the creative part, you know. So just send me the invoice later. I'll sign whatever is needed," smiling face with smiling eyes. The creative part of a construction materials company. "Dad," I called. He was on the other side of the room organizing files. "Did you read this?" He approached, put on his glasses, and read the email. His jaw tightened. "Isabella is young. She was learning. She's 28 years old, Dad. Not a child." Heavy silence between us. "Where is she today?" I asked. "She traveled to Rio. There's an independent music festival. She's going to sing tomorrow." Of course. The company was on fire and she was in Rio singing. I continued sifting through the files until late afternoon. When I finished, I had a complete list of damages. It was worse than my father had admitted. Debts, 2.3 million Brazilian reals. Labor lawsuits, 7. Federal revenue fines, 890,000 Brazilian reals. Unpaid suppliers, 23. Clients lost in the last year, 67% of the base. Remaining employees, 12. There were 45 3 years ago. I sat in the old office chair and looked at my father. He was leaning against the wall, eyes closed, breathing heavily. "Dad, how much available capital do you have now?" "About 80,000, maybe. Everything else is committed." "And assets?" "What can be sold?" "The warehouse is rented. We have some vehicles, but most have open financing." "Equipment?" "They're already old, not worth much." I did mental calculations. It was a deep hole. Very deep. "Can I ask something?" My voice came out harder than I intended. "Why did you put Isabella in charge?" "Really?" He opened his eyes, looked at me. For a long moment, I thought he would deflect as he always did. But then he sighed, a tired and defeated sound. "Because your mother asked." Isabella is going through a difficult time. The music career didn't take off as she expected. She would get depressed, cry a lot. Your mother begged me to give her a chance, so she would feel useful, valued. So you gave her an entire company to play CEO? To inflate her ego. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, Dad. I stood up from the chair, anger finally spilling over. You handed over 25 years of work to someone who had not the slightest qualification, preparation, or a real interest in learning. And you know what's most ironic? You didn't even think to ask me if I wanted to be involved. Marina, you were busy with your things. My things? Dad, I have a company. A technology company that bills more than $3 million a year. I have 15 employees, clients in 8 states, and I'm in negotiations to expand to Latin America. The silence that followed was deafening. My father looked at me as if he were seeing a stranger. $3 million per year, and growing 30% every semester. He sat down slowly, as if his legs had given out. I didn't know, because you never asked. None of you asked. You always assumed I was doing odd jobs, fixing neighbors' computers, creating basic little websites. Because in your minds, I was the daughter without special talent, without shine, without potential for greatness. Marina, that's not. It's true, Dad. And you know it is. I sat back down, calmer now but firm. And now you're here, with everything falling apart, and you finally remember I exist. Not because you value me, but because you're desperate. My father ran his hand over his face, and when he looked at me again, there were tears in his eyes. I had never seen my father cry. You're right, he said, his voice choked. I was wrong. I was very wrong with you. I just always thought you were okay, that you didn't need our attention like Isabella needed. You were always so independent, so strong. That's no excuse, Dad. Strong children also need recognition. They also need to feel seen. We sat in silence for a while. I could hear the tick-tock of the old clock on the wall, the distant hum of traffic outside. What are you going to do? He finally asked. I sighed. It was the million-dollar question, literally. I don't know yet. I need to think. When I left the company that afternoon, my phone rang. It was Lucas, my partner and CTO. Mari, I need to talk to you. It's important. Go ahead. Remember that investment proposal we received 2 months ago? From VentureFlow Capital. I remember. $500,000 for 15% of the company. They increased the offer. $2 million. For 20%. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. You're kidding. No. They saw our numbers from last quarter and want to close soon. But there's a catch. What? They want an answer by the end of the week. And they want us to use part of the investment to expand to 3 more countries in the next 6 months. It's aggressive, but... Mari, it's a giant opportunity. $2 million. It was enough money to save my father's company 3 times over. But it was also the chance to take my own company to another level, transform something good into something extraordinary. Schedule a meeting with them for Tuesday, I replied. I need to see the terms properly. Done. And Mari? Congratulations. You deserve this. I hung up the phone and stood there, in the middle of the street, as the sun set over the city. 2 choices presented themselves in front of me, as clear as they were painful. I could use my resources, my knowledge, my time to save the family company. Prove I was worthy, that I always was. Finally receive the recognition I always wanted. Or I could focus on my own company, accept the investment, and build something so big they could never ignore my existence again. The problem is that one choice excluded the other. There wasn't time, energy, or resources to do both. And for the first time in my life, the decision was completely mine. I got home and found a message from Isabella. The first in months. Hi sis. I'm in Rio. It's amazing here. I met a super important producer. I think that record deal is finally going to happen. Musical note sparkles. Anyway, Mom said you went to the company today. Thanks for helping out there. I know it must have been boring dealing with those boring spreadsheets, haha. Kisses. I read the message 3 times. There wasn't an ounce of awareness of what she had done. Not a trace of responsibility. For her, it was all a temporary inconvenience, an annoying obstacle on the path to her imaginary stardom. And my parents protected her from it. Protected her from the consequences, from reality, from the weight of her own choices. I typed and deleted a response 5 times. In the end, I didn't reply at all. On Sunday, I went to lunch at my parents' house. Isabella was still in Rio, so it was just the 3 of us. My mother had made my favorite dish, roasted chicken with potatoes, and the table was set with that Sunday tablecloth she kept for special occasions. It was strange, as if they were trying to please me, win me over. After all these years, Marina, my mother began serving the salad. Your father told me about your company. $3 million a year. It's impressive. Thank you. Why did you never tell us? I looked at her, really looked. I saw the wrinkles around her eyes, the gray strands she hid with dye, the tiredness that no makeup could disguise. I did tell you, Mom. Several times. You just never paid attention. She opened her mouth to protest, but then closed it. Because she knew it was true. Your mother and I talked, my father said, pushing food around on his plate. About the company, about everything. And we wanted to make a proposal. My stomach tightened. What kind of proposal? If you can save the company, it's yours. Officially. We'll transfer everything to your name. I remained silent, processing. And Isabella? I asked. My parents exchanged uncomfortable looks. Isabella will need to find another path, my mother said softly. It's clear that business isn't for her. And does she know this? Does she agree with this? We'll talk to her when she gets back from Rio, my father replied. But the decision is made. I took a sip of water, buying time to think. It was exactly what I should want, right? The company, the recognition, the final proof that I was capable. But something didn't fit. Something was wrong. Can I ask a question? I looked at both of them. If the company were doing well, if Isabella had succeeded as CEO, would you be making this offer to me? Silence. I continued. Or would I still be just Marina who messes with computers? The backup daughter for when the main star failed. Marina, it's not like that, my mother began. It's exactly like that, Mom. You're offering me the company not because you finally recognize my value, but because you have no other option. Isabella failed, and now I'm plan B. My father dropped his fork on the plate, the sound echoing in the silent dining room. Marina, you're being unfair. We're trying to correct our mistakes. Unfair. The word came out like a dry laugh. Dad, I spent 15 years being invisible in this family. 15 years watching you pour resources, attention, and opportunities into Isabella while I built everything from scratch. And now, when she destroyed what took you decades to build, you come to me hat in hand, offering me the rubble as if it were a prize. My mother started crying silently. Part of me felt bad, but the bigger part, the part that had been ignored during all those years, remained firm. I need to think. I stood up from the table. And I need you to understand something. If I decide to help, it won't be on your terms. It will be on mine. I left the house before they could respond. On Monday, I called an extraordinary meeting with my team. Lucas, my partner, was there. Also Carolina, our CFO, and 3 other key people from the company. I received an investment proposal. I began. $2 million. But before deciding anything, I need to be transparent with you about another situation. I told them everything. About my family, about my father's company, about the mess Isabella had created. When I finished, the silence in the room was dense. Lucas was the first to speak. Mari, you know we support any decision you make. But I need to ask, do you want to save that company, or do you feel obligated? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to prove I can do it, that I always could. But another part is tired of proving things to people who never recognized your value, Carolina completed. I nodded. Can I suggest something? Lucas leaned forward. What if you did both things but your way? What do you mean? Accept the investment. Expand our company. And as for your father's company, he paused thinking. You don't have to save it for free. Turn it into a business. A strategic acquisition. Carolina caught the idea and ran with it. Exactly. Their company may be broken, but it still has assets. The remaining client base, the contracts, the structure. If integrated into our system, it could become our gateway to the construction sector. My brain started working. Are you suggesting I buy the company? For a fair market value, considering the current state, Carolina confirmed. It wouldn't be charity. It would be business. I spent the following week working on two fronts. On Tuesday, I met with the investors from VentureFlow Capital. There were 3 executives, all very serious, all very impressed with our numbers. Ms. Silva, their leader, a man named Ricardo, leaned over the table. We're very interested in making this investment happen, but we need total commitment. $2 million is a lot of money, and we expect it to be used for aggressive growth. I understand perfectly, I replied. And I have an additional proposal that might interest you. I presented my plan: use part of the investment to acquire an already established distribution company, integrate our technology into their processes, and create a completely new division focused on logistics for civil construction. It's a $200 billion sector in Brazil, I explained. And it's completely technologically outdated. If we can optimize the supply chain using our algorithms, we're talking about savings of up to 40% for clients. Ricardo exchanged looks with his colleagues. Do you already have a company in mind for this acquisition? I do. And I'm in preliminary negotiations. Actually, I still hadn't said anything to my parents. But I knew exactly what I was going to propose. On Thursday, I went back to their house. This time, I took Carolina with me and a folder with documents. Isabella was back from Rio, sitting on the couch with a sulky face. She had cut her hair very short and dyed it platinum blonde, probably trying a new artistic image. Hi, sis, she said without much enthusiasm. Mom said you have a proposal to save Dad's company. Not exactly save, I corrected. I have a business proposal. My father and mother entered the room. Everyone sat down, looking at me with a mixture of hope and apprehension. I opened the folder and distributed copies of the document Carolina had prepared. This is a formal acquisition offer, I began. My company, TechFlow Solutions, is offering 800,000 Brazilian reals for the total purchase of the distributor. My father almost choked. 800,000? Marina, the company is worth much more than that. It was worth, Dad. 3 years ago, this company was easily worth $3 million. Today, with $2.3 million in debts, labor lawsuits, lost clients, and destroyed reputation, it's not even worth that. I'm making a generous offer considering the current state. But this company is my legacy. It was your legacy, I corrected gently. Now it's a liability. And I'm offering a dignified way out. Carolina took over. The $800,000 will be paid as follows: $300,000 immediately to cover the most urgent debts and avoid bankruptcy. The remaining $500,000 will be paid over 2 years in monthly installments. In addition, I continued, we'll assume all existing debts and work to renegotiate with creditors. The 12 current employees will be kept, with the option of rehiring for those who were unfairly fired. Isabella huffed. Unfairly? Those people were toxic, created a negative environment. Those people, I turned to her for the first time, built this company together with our father. They were fired because you didn't like them questioning your impulsive decisions. That's not true. I was trying to modernize, bring new ideas. Isabella, you spent 120,000 reais on a brand consultancy that consisted of changing the logo and creating an Instagram with construction memes. You fired the logistics manager, who had 20 years of experience, because he didn't understand the vision. You signed contracts without reading because you thought paperwork was boring. She turned red. You don't know how difficult it is. Dad threw all this on me without any preparation. No. I shouted, and everyone was startled. I never shouted. Don't put this on Dad. He gave you an opportunity one never had. He gave you training, consultants, time to learn. And you treated everything as if it were a game, as if it were another one of your hobbies you abandon when it gets difficult. Tears were running down her face now. You were always jealous of me. You always wanted to be the favorite. I didn't want to be the favorite, Isabella. I just wanted to be seen. My voice got lower, more controlled. But it's not about that now. It's about business. I turned to my parents. You have 72 hours to decide. Accept the offer, and I guarantee the company survives and the employees keep their jobs. Refuse, and you'll have to find another solution, because I won't be waiting. My father looked at the documents, his hands trembling slightly. And me? What happens to me? You can choose. Either retire completely, receive the installments and rest. Or, if you want, you can stay on as a senior consultant part-time with a modest salary, but without decision-making power. You would take my own business from me. No, Dad. I'm saving what's left of it. And I'm doing this as a professional, not as your daughter desperate for approval. Heavy silence fell over the room. My mother finally spoke, her voice weak. And if we refuse? Then I accept another investment I received, expand my company internationally, and you deal with bankruptcy on your own. Isabella can go back to singing in bars, and you can sell the house to pay the debts. I picked up my folder. Like I said, 72 hours. Carolina and I left. In the car, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. That was intense, she said. It was necessary. Do you think they'll accept? They will. Because they have no choice. And I was right. 48 hours later, my father called. We accept the terms. The signing meeting took place at their lawyer's office. My parents looked like they had aged another 10 years. Isabella didn't even show up, sent a message saying she was emotionally unavailable for the event. As my father signed the documents, his hand shook so much he had to stop twice. My mother cried silently beside him. When everything was finalized, my father looked at me. Did you plan this? Let US hit rock bottom and then buy the company for a fraction of its value. The accusation hurt more than I expected. No, Dad. I didn't plan any of this. You created this situation completely on your own. I just offered a solution when no one else would. You could have helped for free. We're your family. And family shouldn't have favorites. Shouldn't ignore one daughter while destroying the other with excess privileges. But here we are. I picked up my copy of the signed documents and stood up to leave. Marina, my mother called me. Do you hate us? I stopped at the door and turned around. No, Mom. I don't hate you. But I'm also not going to live begging for crumbs of your attention anymore. I built something real, something mine, and now I'm expanding this empire with or without the family's approval. I left the office with my head held high. The following 6 months were a whirlwind. With the investment from VentureFlow and the acquisition of my father's company, TechFlow Solutions exploded. We renamed the distributor to BuildFlow and completely transformed it. We implemented our AI systems for route optimization and inventory management. We rehired all the experienced employees Isabella had fired, some with tears in their eyes when they received the call. David, the former logistics manager, came back as operations director. At the first meeting, he shook my hand for a long time. I remember you as a little girl, running around that office, he said. Your father always said you were smart. I just wish he had really believed it. In 3 months, BuildFlow was in the black again. In 6, we had recovered 40% of the lost client base and acquired new contracts that the old administration could never have gotten. TechFlow, with the international investment, expanded to Argentina and Chile. We hired 40 new employees. Our annual revenue exceeded 8 million reais. And then something happened that I didn't expect. A national business magazine contacted me for a cover story, the 30 female entrepreneurs under 35 who are revolutionizing the Brazilian market. The interview was long and detailed. I talked about my journey, about building a company from scratch while in college, about the challenges of being a woman in technology, about the strategic acquisition of BuildFlow. When the magazine hit the newsstands, the cover photo was of me, navy blue blazer, hair pulled back in an elegant bun, standing in TechFlow's modern office, with the city in the background. The headline read, Marina Silva, how she built an 8 million empire while her family bet on the wrong sister. I hadn't authorized that headline. I had been careful in the interview not to turn it into family drama. But the journalist had researched, talked to other sources, and the complete story had leaked. The article told everything. How Isabella received the company as a gift, how she destroyed it in 3 years, how I bought the rubble and turned it into success again. It even had a side-by-side comparison. Photo of Isabella at a show versus photo of me at a technology conference. My phone exploded. Messages from friends, colleagues, former teachers, all congratulating me. LinkedIn full of connection requests. Emails from media outlets wanting more interviews. And then, the message I was both expecting and dreading. It was from Isabella. Are you happy now? Did you get what you wanted? You publicly humiliated me, made our entire family look like villains in your success story? Congratulations, Marina. You won. I hope it was worth destroying your sister in the process. I read the message 3 times. And then, for the first time in weeks, I called her. She answered on the 3rd ring. What do you want? I want you to stop playing the victim. Victim? Marina. You literally exposed me to the entire country. I didn't expose anything, Isabella. You did all of this yourself. I just told my story, and it happens that part of it involves your terrible choices as CEO. I was trying. I was doing the best I could. No, you weren't. You were playing at being a businesswoman while destroying decades of our father's work. And when everything collapsed, you ran away to Rio instead of taking responsibility. Silence on the other end of the line. Isabella, I don't hate you. I never hated you. But I'm also not going to pretend you were competent when you clearly weren't. You were always better than me at everything. Her voice came out small, vulnerable in a way I didn't expect. Smarter, more focused, more. Everything. I just wanted to be good at something. And there, in that moment, I felt something shifting inside me. It wasn't exactly pity, but an understanding. Bella, I used the childhood nickname I hadn't spoken in years. You are good at things. You have a beautiful voice, you're charismatic. You have talent for art. But our parents did you a disservice by convincing you that you were good at everything without ever making you work for anything. And you. Were you angry at me for that? I was. For a long time. But it's not about you, not really. It's about them. About the choices they made, about how they treated us differently. More silence. I messed everything up, didn't I? She finally said. Yes, you did. But it doesn't have to be the end of your story. It just has to be the beginning of you finally growing up. I hung up feeling something strange. It wasn't complete relief, but it was. Something. A piece of weight lifting from my shoulders. 2 days later, I received a formal email. It was from Isabella. Marina, I've spent the last few days thinking about everything. You're right. I never took real responsibility for anything in my life. There was always someone saving me, making excuses for me. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. But I want you to know I'm looking for a real job. Nothing glamorous, just something honest. And I started therapy. Maybe one day we can be real sisters, not just 2 people who share DNA and resentments. Isabella. I read the email several times. I didn't respond immediately. I let it settle. A week later, my mother showed up at the TechFlow office unannounced. The receptionist called me hesitant, asking if she should send her up. Go ahead, I replied. She entered my office slowly, looking around with wide eyes. The office was beautiful, modern, with a panoramic view of the city. Marina, what an incredible place, she said. Thank you. Sit down. She sat in the chair in front of my desk, her hands nervous in her lap. I came without warning because I knew that if I called, you'd make up an excuse not to see me. I didn't deny it because it was true. I need to apologize to you, she continued. Really? Not because you bought the company or because you became successful, but because I was a terrible mother to you. Words I had waited my whole life to hear. And now, hearing them, they didn't have the impact I imagined. I failed you, she continued, tears starting to fall. I treated you as if you didn't need me because you were strong, as if strength meant not deserving love and attention. And I failed Isabella too, in a different way. I turned her into someone incapable of functioning in the real world. Why did you do this? I asked calmly. Why was I never enough? You were always enough, Marina. You are incredible. But I was afraid. Afraid of what? That you didn't need me. Isabella always needed, always sought me out, always made me feel necessary. You were self-sufficient. And I, selfishly, preferred the daughter who made me feel important to the daughter who was truly impressive. It was the most honest thing she had ever said to me. I don't expect you to forgive me, she wiped away the tears. But I needed you to know that I see now. I see everything you've built, everything you are. And I'm proud. Even though I don't have the right to be. I remained silent for a long moment. Thank you for saying that, I finally replied. But I need you to understand, I didn't do all this for you. It wasn't to prove anything, it wasn't to win approval. It was for me. I know. And I don't know if I'm ready to have a normal mother-daughter relationship. Not after everything. I understand. She stood up to leave, but stopped at the door. Your father. He's very proud too. He just doesn't know how to express it without seeming like he's trying to take credit for your success. He chose Isabella for the company. He made that decision consciously. He did. And he'll carry that for the rest of his life. She looked at me with tired eyes. But Marina, holding a grudge won't change the past. It'll just poison your future. After she left, I sat in my chair for an hour, just looking at the city below. She was right about one thing. The grudge was a weight. A weight I had carried for so long I had forgotten what it was like to live without it. 3 months later, TechFlow closed a partnership with a European logistics giant. The contract was for €15 million over 3 years. At the celebration party, I looked around the hall. My team, our partners, investors, clients. Lucas made an emotional speech about our journey. Carolina presented the projections for the next 5 years. They were ambitious and achievable. And at the back of the hall, almost hidden, were my parents and Isabella. I had sent invitations, not expecting them to show up. But there they were. Isabella had her hair back to its natural color, was dressed simply, without the ostentation of before. My mother was holding my father's hand, both looking out of place but trying. When the speeches ended and the music started, my father approached. "Can I steal a minute?" he asked. We walked to the hall's balcony, where the night air was fresh. "I was wrong," he said without preamble. "About everything. About you, about Isabella, about how I handled the company. And I know sorry doesn't fix years of neglect, but sorry." I looked at him, really looked. I saw an aged, tired man, but finally honest. "I accept your apology," I replied. "But I need you to understand, I don't need your validation anymore. I've already validated myself." He nodded slowly. "I know. And that makes me prouder than anything I could have taught you." Isabella approached hesitantly. "Mari, can I talk to you?" My father discreetly stepped away. "I got a job," she said. "Nothing glamorous. Receptionist at a music studio. But it's honest. And I'm learning about the business side that I never cared about before." "That's good, Bella. And I wanted to thank you for the email you didn't respond to." "What email?" "The one I sent 3 months ago. You didn't respond, but you also didn't send something cruel back. That absence of cruelty was kind in a strange way." I smiled despite myself. "I'm trying to learn to let things go. Grudge is too heavy to carry. Do you think one day we can be friends? Or at least, not enemies?" I looked at my younger sister, who for so many years had been my involuntary antagonist. She seemed smaller now, more human, more real. "Maybe," I replied honestly. "But it will take time. And you'll need to keep showing you've really changed." "I will. I promise." When I returned to the party, Lucas intercepted me. "Everything okay?" "Yes. I think. Yes." "Good. Because Ricardo from VentureFlow wants to talk to you. They have another proposal." "Another one?" He smiled broadly. "A big one. Very big." I followed Lucas to where Ricardo was, surrounded by other investors. When they saw me, they made room. "Marina," Ricardo extended his hand. "Congratulations on the European contract. This changes everything." "Thank you. I want to make a proposal. Not here, not now, but next week. It involves expanding TechFlow to 12 countries, turning it into a Latin American leader in tech logistics solutions. We're talking about an investment of $50 million. My heart raced, but I maintained composure. "I'll schedule with my team." After he walked away, I just stood there, letting the information settle. $50 million. 12 countries. Latin American leader. This was bigger than anything I had dreamed of in that tiny room, fixing old computers, wondering why my family didn't see me. And they still didn't see, not completely. Maybe they never would. But that didn't matter anymore. Because I saw myself. And the world was beginning to see too. I looked through the hall window at the illuminated city below. So many lights, so many lives, so many stories happening simultaneously. And mine finally was being written on my own terms. It wasn't a revenge story. Revenge implies you're still stuck in the past, reacting to it. This was something different. It was liberation. It was proof that you can come from a family that doesn't value you and still build an empire. That being underestimated doesn't define your ceiling. It just tests your determination. That true success isn't making the people who ignored you regret it, but becoming so big that their opinion simply stops mattering. My parents and Isabella were there, at the party, trying. And that was something, I supposed. It didn't erase years of neglect, but it was a beginning of recognition. But my success no longer depended on that recognition. They could be proud or not. They could finally see me or remain blind. It didn't change anything, because I had already won. Not against them, but despite them. And that, I realized as Carolina pulled me onto the dance floor and Lucas made an exaggerated toast and my team laughed and celebrated around us. That was the best revenge possible. It wasn't destroying them. It was transcending them. It was looking back one day at that 16-year-old girl building her first website alone, invisible in her own home, and saying, I saw you. I always saw you. And I built all of this for you. The music played loud, the lights flashed, and for the first time in decades, I danced without weight on my shoulders. Free. Finally, completely free. If this story touched you in any way, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories of overcoming injustice. Your comments and support make all the difference for other people who may be going through similar situations. Until the next story.